I want to welcome our guest to the show. It's Tim Halloran. Welcome to the show, man.
Hey, glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm glad you're here. So let's get right into it, man. I want to talk about your book, and I want to start with where I always start with most people on the show. What got you into Bigfoot, and what started you down this path that you've been on?
Well, great question, and it pretty interesting, but not probably not like some of the folks you have on the show. And it started, I guess like most folks, maybe from my generation and maybe prior and after, it was started with the Patterson Gimlin film. I mean, as growing up, I was just fascinated with it. And just loved it. Didn't really dive into it back then. Just stated interest, and I thought it was interesting and unique and cool. So went on in life, and fast forward a bunch of years because I'm not going to disclose my age on this. um, my wife and youngest son Gabriel, they loved watching Finding Bigfoot, and they just did it all the time. And she eventually convinced me to go to a conference. It was the Ohio Bigfoot Conference, and I didn't. Well, I wasn't kicking and screaming because like I said, I'm open minded. But I wasn't really into it, and and that was just fascinating. I went in there with an open mind, but also thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to be around here with these crazy people, and in anything we do, we're all a little wacky, I think, in our own way. So and what I found out is, I'll never forget, I'm sitting there, and I met some really cool people. I mean, we just got welcomed in by the host. The first night we got there early. We met. Oh, I got to stop here for 1 second because your fans who are listening, I know they're probably gonna. Hopefully, they're not drinking right now, but there's probably going to be a lot of drinking games going on tonight. So, or during this. So yeah, I just remember getting there. Checking into the at Salt Fork Lodge. uh, Jeff Meldrum's checking in with me, and my wife's going berserk. She's like, "Oh my gosh, it's Jeff Meldrum." She loves Jeff, and I'm like, "Cool, it's just some guy, checking." And I knew who he was, obviously, but you know, and I sitting and chit chat with Jeff, and long story short, I got to know some of the people there. Mark DeWorth was hosting the event, so he was nice enough to let us just kind of hang out with some of they had a couple events that were kind of, I don't say, that were just going on, and we got to meet some people. And I think the biggest thing for me, Brian, was I'm still skeptical. I'm sitting in and listening to Dr. Jeff Meldrum talk, and then I just said, wow, there's actually scientists. And of course I knew who Jeff was, but really listening to him and diving in, I never really before then, I never really, I just knew the name and things like that. But I was just fascinated. I was like, wow, there's actually a scientist that is studying this, and what he's saying really makes sense. And I remember Cliff. I think Cliff followed up um, with Dr. Jeff's speech and or talk, and Cliff was great too. I mean, Cliff, same thing. It was like, wow, it's just I was just fascinated, and that just kind of opened the door for it. And that's really what got me thinking about it. And really, again, it wasn't on my radar prior. I just thought it was cool. I mean, it's just like, wow, there's this thing could really be out there, roaming the woods, in North America. So that's where it started. Yeah, where do you want to go from there, Brian? Sorry.
Well, I guess after you're at this conference and you meet these people and you see somebody like Jeff Meldrum, for example, talk, and Cliff Brackman, and they're clearly intelligent people and they approach this from a very scientific standpoint. Where were you on the subject after that conference, and what were your thoughts on the possibilities of them being correct? And then what was sort of the next step? Did you start doing research for yourself, or what was the next step for you after that?
So, and another great question. I think I just kind of went with it, and then following year went to same thing, started going to a couple conferences here and there, but never really I just remained open-minded. I think one of the really unique things is made friends with some people, and then I started, some of them were just, not speakers and folks that are researching, but just people going to the vendors and just people going to the conferences, and it's just really unique. Met some really good people, and some really great researchers, and so just it kind of springboarded. Just stayed involved, just but never really dove into. So I haven't really done a ton of research. I don't. I guess my research basically is, reading some books and researching the researchers is for my book. So I'm not really out there doing any research at all of in regards to what some of the other individuals are that are in the book and other individuals that aren't in the book. Um, so that's where I was with that. And then I guess I could fast forward if you want me to tell you how I kind of got into the book. I can do that right now too.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the idea for the book, where that came from, and then sort of the concept of the book, and then we'll move into some of the meat and potatoes of the book without giving it away, obviously.
Right. Definitely, definitely. So, I was just, listen, just like the folks that listen to your podcast, and I read books. I think my I think my book collection's probably tripled on the subject since I started the book because I get suggestions and awesome suggestions. I mean, I even had Todd Neese actually send me some books. He just, hey, I got these books I'm going to send you for no for free. I'm like, man, you didn't have to do that, but so 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 definitely did was doing some reading, listen. I love podcasts, so maybe that's probably what springboarded it is really starting listening to the podcast and then expanding, you know, the the researchers that some of them I didn't know about. You see some of them on TV. I've before I started a book, I've befriended some of them. So I'd had a group of individuals that are doing research that are friends, and we talk about obviously Bigfoot or Sasquatch, depends on if you're in Canada or United States. and and it was fascinating. I mean, and then I was talking to my wife one day. I said, you know what would be a great idea? I said, I'm listening to all these podcasts, I'm reading books, but there's so many people out there doing research. And I think there's got to be a bunch of people like me who are interested in the subject, but don't know who's doing what. You hear some, of course, there's the big names and you hear some, but there's so many researchers, individuals that are just doing some really unique things. And all, for the most part, it depends on who you talk to for the same cause, just solving the mystery. So I said, wouldn't it be great to just have a have a place to put all these researchers in, just so almost like a directory, maybe would be a word to say, and it's not really what the book's going to be, but like a directory of, hey, these are researchers. This is what they're doing. Here's a little bit about them, and that kind of started it. So I called my good friend Matt Pruitt. I said, let me run this idea by Matt. And this was Brian. This was just kind of a concept, and because I'm an idea guy, and I just like I like to do things and new things, and I always come up with some ideas. Sometimes I don't go through with them, but I'm a good idea guy. And I called Matt. I said, hey Matt, what do you think about this? And Matt was writing. He's still writing his book. He was writing his book then, um, and uh, and Matt said, yeah, that's a really good idea. And then he gave me a ton of good advice because he said, hey, you should do this, you should do that. He said, make sure that you take certain, not precautions, but he said, sometimes what happens when people he said he's been burned and by reporters and people doing interviews that take his words and twist them around. So one of his big pieces of advice is, which, and when we get into the concept of the book, he said, keep it in their words. And he said, and don't, and then and be upfront about it and be open and share and record it. He said 100% record it because you can give him a copy of it. You can let him review recording and the chapter and such and such. So that was great. That was a milestone for me. I said, okay, Matt thinks it's a great idea. I said, if Matt likes it, I'm onto something here. Um, so then I'm sitting, I'm kind of sitting, I'm going to go back. It's probably it was last summer, so it hasn't even been that long. And I said, I knew Doug, didn't know him really well, but I knew him. Well, we were, Doug joined Facebook a little while ago, but we were friends, and we had a couple chats back and forth. And I said, well, I know Doug, Blaine, and Alex Highcheck. For folks who don't know them, Doug Highcheck's. Well, if you listen to this show, I'm sure you know who they are because Brian mentions them once in a while. But Alex and Blaine are Doug's sons, and they are one of the many things that they do because they're just so creative. They have a publishing company called Hanger One Publishing, and they publish books just in this arena. It's not just all Bigfoot and Sasquatch. It's just it could be paranormal. They probably do books outside of that as well. So I said, well, let me call Doug and see what he thinks, and let me find out because I didn't know much about publishing or really writing a book. I mean, I do things, but I've never written a book and gone down this path. And so I called Doug. I said, and we scheduled some time to chat about it. And Doug says, he said, that's a great idea. He said, and he loved it. He says, this is unique. I don't know if anyone's ever done this before. There's been a couple things that been attempted in the past. And he said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. He said, I'm going to create a book cover for you. He said, get me a title. And this is all the same day. And hadn't even thought about doing a title yet. So what am I going to call it? And it just, I kind of ran through some ideas, again, bounced a couple ideas off my wife, and then shot a couple ideas to Doug, and we went back and forth and came up with the Bigfoot Influencers. And same day, a couple hours later, I get this book cover because he goes, once I send you the book cover, you're gonna have to write the book. Then you're just gonna, I'm gonna motivate you to do it. So that's what he did. Uh, we uh, we created the book cover, or he created the book cover, and didn't really change much on the book cover. We have some cool ideas as we go on to other books, what we're gonna do with the book cover, and that's what started it. And so from there, it was just then I had to start. Okay, now I'm really doing this. Again, this was a concept prior. And I said, where am I going to start? And then next I started compiling a list of researchers. So really, I guess the goal of the book is to highlight people who are influencing the subject. And it doesn't have to be a scientist or researcher. There's a few non-researchers in here. Mr. Les Stroud, who I think you know Les pretty well as well. I'm actually working on my third edit of his chapter right now. So there's I wanted to highlight these individuals. Just give a little glimpse about what they're doing. Obviously, most of them you could write a whole book on each one of them. But I wanted to dedicate sections of the book, basically mini chapters. Some might be a little longer than others, but we'll see. And the biggest challenge was, in the beginning, Brian, I thought, okay, how am I going to get, you know, 35 or so to 40 researchers? And that's what I'm thinking, me being naive about it. And now I'm thinking, okay, how do there's so many researchers out here. I can't fit them all in one book. So I know I'm gonna leave some folks out of the book unintentionally. I'm going to try to mention other researchers, even if I don't get a full, a full mini chapter on them or a full chapter on them. But I'm going to try to mention others in the book and highlight them as well. And really, the concept is to maybe there's a few personal questions I mixed in there. Matt Pruitt. Again, I want to pause there and Matt Pruitt for those who don't know who Matt Pruitt is. Matt Pruitt's he's from Georgia. He's been researching for a long, I think since the 90s. He was involved a little bit with finding Bigfoot or more. He also produces. He's the producer on Cliff and Bobo's podcast, and just a super nice guy. He's super intelligent on the subject, super helpful. He's just one of the coolest guys that I've met out there. And And so Matt and I came up with some questions again with a little bit of help from the family here. I had my own questions, had some input, and then got with Matt, talked to him about some questions, and then put a list of questions together. So again, I covered some personal stuff, um, and also mostly topic related. And then it's changed a little bit since I started, which is interesting. So I had my core questions, and as I started doing interviews, I adapted because I said, well, you know what? I don't like this question, or this one's come up, and so really had to do some adjustments on that, and really came out with, and I don't mind, if as we get into it, I can read you some of the examples of the questions, if you are interested in hearing that as well. Might be, and I could give you a couple personal ones and a couple, a couple, topic related ones, and maybe even a couple, maybe I'll slide a couple answers in, some funny ones as well. Um, and so that's where I was with the concept and the idea of the book and how I was going to put it together. Now, there's going to be some other unique things in the book. I'm going to have a list. So one of my questions is, I ask every researcher, if I was going to start as an enthusiast or a researcher, what books, in addition to the ones that they may have authored, what books would you recommend reading? So I've got this huge list of all these books and there's a lot of consistencies, obviously. So I'll have a page. I'll list all the books. I'm going to make sure that anyone who's reading the book knows how to follow the researcher, or if they want to, there's a couple researchers that may not be, open. They may not be taking reports and such. But gonna have some information like that, in there as well. So if you want to follow the researchers, if you want to check out their website, their YouTube, et cetera, they can do that as well. So really, the book's really about the researchers. I want to really and the audience. So and the subject, I want to make, when I say the researchers, I mean I want to highlight the researchers, things that they're doing, to make a difference in the in I hate to say the community, but in the subject matter.
Let me ask you this. There's a lot of things that I want to go into, obviously, with the researchers, and I want to get into some of the nitty gritty of who you've got in the book and why and those kind of things. But let me ask you this. The way that media, for example, influences this subject, right? There's tons of podcasts out there, there's tons of television shows and things like that. Did you consider at all at any point including some of those people that were influential in the subject in the media, say podcasters, for example, or just television personalities that may or may not necessarily go out and do any boots on the ground type of research? There are plenty of shows out there who do that, and the researchers are doing it on camera, and then that's pretty much it. I know Cliff and Bobo are not those people. I know they go out and actually research. I know Matt. Matt's been on the show before. Super great guy, and I know Matt is definitely boots on the ground when it comes to the research that he does. But what about the influence? Is that something that you considered with the media and say podcasters and just TV personalities?
Yes, actually, and I have. Not sure. I have a couple individuals that are in the book that may not be actually doing research. We'll talk about Les Stroud. Obviously, most folks know who Les Stroud is, from Survivor Man. He's not out there doing Bigfoot research, but he's an influencer because he's got his Survivor Man, and then he ran a series on Survivor Man Bigfoot. So he's documenting, he's doing documentary films on it or TV shows on it. So I'm going to fast forward quickly because it's going to answer your question. So again, one of the challenges was, who do I put in the book? How do I get them in the book? In my list, I was over 100, and after I really started thinking about it, and it did include media individuals as well. And talking to Doug, actually, originally he told me this because this is kind of a funny story. When I first called him and told him the concept of the book, he said, "Well, hey Tim, after you do the first book," and I had to stop him. I said, "What do you mean after the first book?" I was only thinking about one book. He goes, "Well, no, after you do the first book, then you can do it by regions and you can do it, that way you can get more researchers in, and you can just expand it." And then he goes, well, guess what? And after you do Bigfoot, you can do UFOs. And then you can do paranormal. And you could just keep going. I say, well, I'm just really kind of I mean, I'm interested in all that other stuff, but I'm just kind of focused on Bigfoot right now. So so that was funny. So what I'm gonna do is I'm definitely, I mean, once I'm done with my interviews here, I'm gonna expand the interviews out, and for the next books. So I'm not quite sure. The concept right now I have is, I thought about yeah, now talking to you, I was gonna blend in the media within the regionals, which is kind of the geographic books, which might be tough because podcasts and medium reach, or, globally. Um, but I thought, like, again, like you're in North Carolina per se, I could, lump you in, as an example, lump you in with my East Coast group. So I think I'm gonna do 4 for the United States based on geographic, locations. Um, I thought about 3, but I don't know if I can do it in 3. I might do a Midwest. I gotta get that Texas and that area in. Then I do West Coast, basically could be California, Oregon, Idaho, and Washington, and maybe, and everything else up in that area. Minnesota, I guess could, yeah, do an East Coast, do a Southeast. So, and then go into Canada, do a book for Canada, maybe do one, an international one, which I think could be unique, covering, some of the other, bipedal, type, you know, uh, reports and creatures that could possibly be out there as well. But now, after talking to you, Brian, I could just do one on the media. I mean, maybe I'll do that too. Maybe I'll just do one based on which would be a great idea. I'll definitely mention you if I do that. I'll make sure you're in the front of the book. Say, hey, I got this idea from Brian. Make sure you, but that's a possibility too. So it's definitely, it's fun. It's definitely unique and fun. I think it's unique, and it's expanded and morphed. And I've come up with ideas. Another idea is, I mean, there's some of these groups out there that I could almost write a whole book just on the individuals in that book. I mean, you've got the folks at the Olympic Project, the Wood Ape Conservancy, the North American Wood Ape Conservancy as well. The group down, that Matt Pruitt and Daryl Collier and a bunch of those individuals are part of, Kathy Strain and Bob Strain. I could write, there's so many people in that group. I mean, and scientists and just, I could write a whole book just on the NAWAC. So it's definitely, it's got my, I mean, I might be writing forever. I don't know if I'm ever going to get a break, but it's fun because I love it. I can tell you some things I've learned and don't love about it, but we can get into that too. So did that answer your question?
It did, and we'll definitely have to get into that. And I tell you, if Doug Hijack's involved, he's going to keep you working for a long time. Doug called me out of the blue yesterday just to introduce me to Lon Strickler and to try to get Lon on the show for a future episode. So he's a cool friend to have, and I love those kind of things. I was sitting here editing the show, and I looked down and I was like, oh shit, I missed a call from Doug Hijack. So I called him back, and he was like, hey, I want to introduce you to Lon Strickler. Hold on, hey Lon, this is Brian. So if Doug's involved, he's going to keep you working. That's for sure. So let's talk a little bit about who's in the book. Some of the researchers that you've made that decision and you've done some of the interviews with. Can you tell us a little bit about those, and certainly throw in some of those questions? And if you want, we can talk about some of the answers that folks can look forward to and see in the book.
100%. I guess, maybe we'll start with, in no specific order, a couple individuals that I think are important, to this subject, or few. When I think what I've learned, and even dove in more from talking to these individuals, the whole group, um, is real to understand the history. And sometimes we get into this, and I'm guilty of it too. It's, hey, if everyone knows what the Patterson Gimlin film is. Have you, but there's a ton of information around it, and there's potential controversy. There's been, I think everything, most of that's been debunked. And at the end of the day, I was talking to, and we'll get into one person here before I get into the historians, Esteban Sarmiento, or Dr. Esteban Sarmiento. So Esteban was in the original Sasquatch Meat Science documentary, which is, I think, is probably the best one that's ever been made. Um, produced by, everyone grab your glasses, Doug Hychek, and included, grab your glasses again, Jeff Meldrum. um, so and well, Esteban was in that, and he's a scientist. He studies primates, um, and he's probably not a believer. I mean, he says, when I see one, I'll believe it. Um, so so that it was interesting to have him, his input and his take on it, and from a, just from that standpoint from someone who's not really in the, he's been on TV shows and things like that, but not really in the Bigfoot realm. He's not, he's not out there actively researching it. He has his own thing. He was called in many times as, because he was a specialist in primatology. So so he's one of the individuals in the book, because he's still there, and he's again, going back to the, when, I think it's 2003. I'm sure Doug's gonna probably punch me if I say the wrong date. He will never punch me. He's too much of a nice guy. But when the documentary came out, but and he's still doing it. He's had a fun interview with him, um, and then I think the historians that all everyone should consider when they start, if they're interested in the subject. I mean, everyone has their own thing. Like my wife, she loves the history and she loves reading about Dr. Meltzer, but she really likes the eyewitness reports, and that's really what she's into, which is awesome. I mean, that's what's so fun about this subject, is you can pick and choose what you want to do. So Daniel Perez, who's been, for and he's for individuals who don't know who Daniel is. Daniel's been around this subject, since the 70s. He's maybe the unofficial historian or librarian of the subject. He's got more info. Yep. Did you get he just got a new one, just came out too. With the books, which is great. I was joking with Daniel, and it's 100% a joke. I said, Daniel, you should have waited. He just did, in the last Bigfoot Times print. He highlighted, some of the top books on the subject. And I said, Daniel, you couldn't have waited till my book came out, so maybe I could have made that list. Totally joking, because I wasn't serious about that. But Daniel just, he's so again, he's like a historian. So he's been such a big help. And he's doing something else for me. I've heard, I know how and why. I asked Daniel last night. I said, hey Daniel, can you provide for the book, so I can share with the readers of how the term Bigfoot was coined? Of course he knows it. I mean, I get, you know, all these things, which is typical Daniel, because he's so methodical and he's so detail oriented. He's not just going to give you a one word answer. He's going to give you what you need to know. So Daniel's pretty fascinating. He's just been, he used to go up and interview. You can, if you look up some interviews with, you can probably find them on YouTube, with a lot of the four horsemen of Bigfoot and just individuals like that he was involved with. So he's a neat guy. And then another one that comes to mind is, and I know you've had Thomas Steenberg on your show too. So Thomas is out of Canada, and he's same thing. He knows so much about the history of the subject, and it's just, he dives into. And one of the really cool things about about Thomas is he'll look into historical things that happened, you know, and then he'll go through old archives and really just try to piece it together and do a full blown out summary of it. So Thomas is great also. Um for folks who've know who Renee DeHinden is, which I think if you listen to this podcast, you probably do. He's one of the four horsemen. He was he was Canadian, but he was Swiss. And Thomas Steenberg has most amazing and funny impersonation of Renee DeHenden. He spent a lot of time with Renee DeHenden, and it's just hilarious. So it's, I may even put some audio in, which actually I'm jumping here. So part of the book is, and this was Doug Hychek's idea, because what he can do is we're going to put within the book, we'll have the ability we're going to add QR codes. So the readers can actually click the QR code and they'll get a bunch of bonus things. So it could be audio, like maybe I think I'll have the Ron Moorhead's Sierra Sounds. Could be a video, could be a link to a website. When Thomas Steenberg was telling me how the term Sasquatch was coined, I was able to find the original article that came out in 1929, and I'm going to put a link to that in there. So that's kind of cool. So just some fun, unique things that maybe some people never knew, and or didn't have as much detail. I do want to mention another individual that's going to be in the book, and that's doing, from the historical standpoint, is Todd Prescott. He's in Canada as well. I think he's got a bunch of John Green's files, and he's going back and digging up and finding a bunch of old videos from conferences, and just really unique things that's just the other side of research that some people may not think about when they're talking about the subject. They're thinking, hey, research, going out in the woods and looking at where things are, but there's also the historical accounts of it. So those are a few from the history standpoint that really stand out for the book. I'm gonna pause there, Brian, to see if there's anything that you want to add.
I think that's great, man. And I recently had a bunch of listeners reach out to me and tell me that they stopped listening, frankly, to some of the other Bigfoot podcasts because I threw something out. We've got a Sasquatch Odyssey fans group on Facebook, and I'm in there quite often. And I threw it out to some of them, and I got some private messages saying, I used to listen to a lot of Bigfoot shows, and I like the Joe, regular Joe kind of encounter stories that you cover on your show, but I really enjoy the well-known researchers that are into the history of the Bigfoot thing. And I've always struggled with that because I've tried to do a mixture of I've had so many amazing people on the show so far. I've been so fortunate with Ron Moorhead and Jeff Meldrum and Doug Hychek and Matt Pruitt and Kathy Strain and the list, Shane Corson from the Olympic Project. So I've had all these great people, and it's always a balance, right? You've got to do this balance of doing the Joe, these boys from Georgia that just had an encounter, and
Hmm.
the people that are making the rounds on the podcast. And I struggle with that sometimes because they do make rounds. They're on just about every show that there is, and it gets watched and repeated often.
Hmm.
But after I got that feedback from the other listeners, I thought, I don't care. I don't care if they've been on Doug's show or whatever the case may be, or Sasquatch Chronicles with Wes. I don't care. I'm interested in the history. I'm interested in I've reached out and talked to Daniel Perez about coming on the show, and Daniel's first thing to me was, well, I'm not really a researcher. I don't know what you would have me on the show to talk about. You'd have to send me a list of questions and let me look over them and make sure that I'm going to add something to the show. And I was like, holy shit, you're Daniel Perez, dude. Like, it, just the fact that you've talked to so many people and documented so many encounters, that's gold to me because I am into the history of this because I want to understand it. And you got to understand the history of where this came from to figure out a path to move forward to get some of the answers that, frankly, we've been all seeking, right? So I think it's great that you're doing those historical people
Thank you.
and including people like Daniel Perez because once these people are gone, that stuff dies, There's so much that died with John Green and Renee DeHenden and the other four horsemen of the Bigfoot world, and we'll never get that back. There's nobody out there doing what they were doing in the beginning. So I think it's great that you're approaching it from that standpoint. Who else have you got in the book that may just be like more of the researchers of today versus the historians of the past?
Right. Well, you mentioned Shane Corson. So Shane's in the book. He's part of the Olympic Project, and the Olympic Project, I'm not sure exactly when it started, but it's been going around. Derek Randall's been part of that. I think he started it. And the Olympic, they've doing some unique things up there. Shane and team, David Ellis is part of that. I know Amy Boo's been doing some things up there with him as well, and they've got a bunch of people that I'm going to leave out, and not intentionally. So I apologize ahead of time. But Shane's, they're out there. They've, I guess not everyone, not the most interesting thing, but one of the unique things that they've found, and they've had a ton of vocals. Again, David Ellis is involved, and they've had some, I guess, and they've had just different experiences that happen, and they get really methodical on what their cameras, with their audio, and really a focused approach to it. Um, and then they found the potential nesting area. There's two nesting sites that they uncovered, that they've had, again, they've had Dr. Jeff Meldrum out there. They've had, Cliff Barrickman's been out there. There's been some other scientists that aren't known in the research world, because I won't say undercover, but they're in the closet right now because they don't keep their jobs. And I think they were part of, because Amy Boo has, the Project Zoo book. So I just bounced into another researcher, but they tie in together. So Amy has this project where they do Zoom calls, and there's always topic related. There's always a speaker, and the group started, and Amy can tell you the story way better than I can, but the group started uh, when there were some individuals that reached out to her that were interested in the subject, and they were actually scientists, and she didn't know it at first until she got to know them and meet them. They were scientists that just really couldn't speak, really come public with it, but they were super interested, and I think they were they were in the primatology, or the primate area of a zoo, maybe. I think that's probably more specific where they started. And so there's a group of scientists and some non-scientists, some researchers, and they get on these Zoom calls, and there's usually a topic, and it's really unique. So you've got this whole group of other individuals out there that the public doesn't know about, because they're choosing not to, again, because they're kind of, not coming out that they're interested in the subject. But they talk about the subject. They have these calls, and I've attended a few of them, and they're fascinating. And I don't really have much input on it. I'm just sitting back and listening. Shane and the team up there is involved. Doug's on there. There's just a big group of people, and it varies sometimes on each one of the calls, and so that's unique too. Um, and there's just I could go on and on. There's just so many things that I didn't know about that was happening out there, and w- really, I'm hoping to shed some light on it with the book and just give a little glimpse. I mean, again, I could write a whole book on a lot of these people, just on them, but I just want to give a glimpse, some of the things that are doing, some interesting questions. I had some fun questions, some not to say controversial, but um, definitely, I you know again, the concept of the book is, it's almost like I'm doing basically what you're doing with me right now. I'm interviewing them. I have my questions, and and then I'm gonna have the list of questions, and I'm gonna put the answers in their own words, um, and it's gonna be their answers. So there's been a couple times I say, "Oh, maybe I should pull that out," but I'm like, I can't. I mean, I can, but why would I pull it out? Because that's what they want to say. I'm not gonna, the only thing times I have to pull things out is for space reasons, so that I'll keep it relevant, and I'm learning, to keep some fun things in there, keep some interesting things, make sure I add some personal notes, but also keep the word count down, and keep it, keep it interesting. And I don't want to say controversial, but there's definitely some edge to some of the book, which is going to be fun.
Well, let's talk about a couple of the questions. Can you give us some examples of some of the questions that we can look forward to in the book, and maybe a couple of the interesting answers that you've received so far?
Yeah, sure. So one of the questions is, if you could take someone past or present on an expedition, who would it be? ton of different answers on that, and some of them were, you know, a really heartfelt one. Thomas Shea, who's in Northern Kentucky, he said his son had passed away, and he said that's who I'd take on my, if I could take someone on an expedition, and they love researching together. So sometimes there's things that really touch you, and you're like, wow, um, um, Les Stroud, his was John Denver for the answer, and I'll let everyone read it to find out why, which was really really unique. Um, Obviously, Tom Steenberg was Renee DeHinden, and so he had some great stories about Renee DeHinden. So that's one of the questions. I do ask questions. And again, some of this may not make the book. So I'll have some outtakes available, some bonus material. I ask about music. It seems like we're all into music, and not all of us, but there's just such a mix of musical tastes, and which some of them surprised me too. Coming from some of them. So I ask about what type of music and musicians and things like that. Um, when we get into individuals, I asked some individual questions, and I this is something I changed later. I originally had all the I had all the same questions, and it's actually my wife's idea, so I'll give her credit for this because she's brilliant anyway. Um, she said, "Well, you should really get into some specific questions that are related just to that person." I was like, "Duh! Why didn't I think of that before?" So I did that, and so there's things, like I asked Cliff Barrickman. I said, "What impact do you think finding Bigfoot had on the subject?" So that was an interesting question, and he's got mixed feelings on that. I think he's been pretty vocal about that in the past. So that was interesting. Topic related, you just like usually ask, how did they get involved in it? The basic ones, and you almost, we have to ask those. I mean, you hear someone on a podcast, you talk to them, and some of the individuals I interviewed already knew the answers, but I always get something new out of it, which is always unique. You always find a new extra thing, because I've heard, I may have heard this person on 6 podcasts already, and so I know how they got into it or why they got into it, but it's always good to do that. So get those out, environmental conditions, if this is what's involved for this, what would an animal, if it's a primate, um, need to survive? So that's always an interesting question. And some consistent answers, but on some of them. Um, i ask um then I ask, I'll ask some controversial ones, like, what do you think of the Paul Freeman footage? I've been asked enough people about that. That came on a little later, or just not only the footage, but the cast and such like that. And Paul Freeman, the folks go back, and Paul Freeman's not around anymore, but he had a couple videos, got some footage, potential footage, and photographs, and a bunch of casts, footprint and hand casts, and there's a lot of people on the fence on what they think, because apparently, Paul Freeman admitted that he had I won't say hoax, but faked some prints. And I'll say that lightly, because sometimes researchers will create uh, wooden or footprint casts just so they can go out and see, so because they are doing research. So not sure the clarity on that, I don't know if anyone knows what he faked and what he didn't fake, if it was for research or if it's for other reasons. And I get mixed answers on that. Some think that he's, everything was legit, and others think that everything was a total hoax. So those are always fun as well. Um, I asked, Les and I get into Todd Standing, um, which I did listen to your, to Todd Standing interview and you did really, really well on that. That was a good interview. And, we, again, Todd Standing is one of those controversial people that you know, everyone's going to have their own feelings about. So that's always interesting as well. I'm trying to think of some other questions that I'm just looking through a couple of my sheets here. I got all my research things here. Um,
While you're looking, was there anything that stood out? Was there any big surprises in the answers that you got, or did anybody leave you scratching your head after the interview saying, "Hmm, I didn't think that was going to come up"?
I think when when you have an answer that most of the individuals are pretty consistent on, and you have one that comes out of left field, maybe, and you say, "Oh, that's interesting. I never thought of it that way." I you know, Ron Moorhead comes to mind. Ron's been doing this for 50 years, and he's got some, no one. It's some fascinating things, and he dives into some, you know, alternate uh, alternate things that these could be, that they may not all be flesh and blood. There could be, or if they are, they could be, some what when he refers to quantum physics involved, and some things like that are involved in it. So sometimes I don't know if that really surprised me, but it definitely was interesting. I think maybe a couple things that surprised me is I think there was no doubting that the four horsemen, um, Peter Byrne, Renee DeHenden, John Green, and Grover Krantz, all had some controversy at times, but some of the things that have come out were interesting from that. So it was more intense than I expected it to be. Which was interesting as well. And then some of the answers I actually Peter Burns actually going to be in the book, which is interesting. And he's such a unique individual, and he's 90, 95, I guess, and he's in his 90s, and just, I mean, it just to have him in the book is pretty cool, and more than pretty cool, it's pretty amazing. But um, and then and just to take of how the different, because Peter's not that his mindset still, he's been doing it for so long, and there's so many new things that have come out, but he still has a lot of that old school, and Tom Steenberg the same way, and probably Daniel Perez. They still do a lot of the old school things because, a lot of it's taking reports, being methodical about it, and getting out in the woods. I think that's been an overwhelming thing that I heard from all the individuals is, if you wanted to, you got to be out in the woods. I mean, obviously, there's different types of research, like you said, but if you want to, if you're not out in the woods, you're not going to have anything. Um, you're not going to be able to push it forward. I think Russ Jones told me something I didn't think about, which is kind of unique. He said, he used to travel all over the place, and he said now he's focused on two or three locations, and he said make sure if you're going to get into research, you pick a place, you pick locations that are close enough where you can get to within, whatever it is, an hour, less than an hour, or hour, 2 hours from your home. Because if you don't, then you're not going to be able to spend as much time out there. So he said, be focused on your research, and don't pick a gazillion areas. Just pick a few areas or one area. A lot of them say just pick one area close by your home so you can frequent it. So, so that's something unique, I think, that I never thought about prior to this. Yeah, there's a bunch of, there's things that the mimicking that individuals claim to hear, whether it's mimicking voices, whether it's mimicking car door slams, mimicking whistles. There's things that a lot of researchers and witnesses claim that they're hearing these Bigfoot mimicking. So I think that's fascinating too.
So where are you in the process of the book now? I know it's not done, but where are you, and when do you think you'll have it done and expect it to be out?
So originally, I was hoping to have it done by the end of the year. I was probably overshooting. Right now, I've got everybody interviewed. I may have one more to add. Um, about 3/4 of the way through. I think the biggest project here was the transcription part of it. What I love doing is what you're doing now. Is That's the fun part. I get to do it, get on these interviews, but then the work comes after that. I mean, there's work before it because you got to prep and you got to make sure you're getting the right questions and things like that. Uh, but the transcribing part of it takes some time because again, I want to keep it in the words, and then also, have to edit it because you're gonna have to pull out the like you do with your podcast. After you listen to me, you're probably gonna have to pull out a lot of ums and uh, and Brian, I will say what happened, and it just happened literally this past weekend. I said, why, I record these interviews and I go back and transcribe them, and I'm just listening to the audio, and I said, I got to get some software. And I looked into the past, and there was, and I didn't really look into it in too much detail because I thought it was like per minute, and it was just crazy expensive. So I said, I'm not going to pay a service to transcribe this. Well, then I found one that, is basically it's not that expensive to transcribe, and it's been a life changer. I mean, I just did it over this weekend. So I'm about probably 2/3 the way through all my transcriptions already. So I hope to have, I obviously want to get the book done by when the conferences start really get into the season. I'm hoping 30 days, might be pushing it a little bit, 30 to 45 days, I'll be ready to roll and have the book out there.
Well, when you do, we'll definitely have to have you back, man, and talk a little bit about the book and maybe do some. I don't know. We might even do a live show. Who knows? And take questions and let people sort of live interact, and maybe we can give away a audio copy or something or whatever. We'll figure that out. But I'd love to have you back once it's out, man. And definitely, I've enjoyed the conversation, and I really
Good.
appreciate your time and coming on and talking to us.
Most definitely appreciate it, Brian, and look forward to, all the future things that you got coming forward. So congrats on your success so far, and people love you. So I enjoy listening.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Oh, that was awesome, man.
Good.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to schedule something to when the book is actually out and people can we can actually sell it. We'll have you back on the show and maybe we can even have Doug come by or something and talk about the process and whatever.
Well, I thought about that too. I said, maybe I could, when I do some of these, I could always bring Doug, or, I can't bring, obviously I can't bring a team of researchers that are in the book, but it would be kind of neat. I thought about, maybe, hey, maybe I'll have Doug do, if we do it like a joint podcast or something, or just have him join the podcast. So that would be fun. Um,
Yeah, maybe we'll
get,
set that up when the book's actually out. We can get our schedules lined up and have you and Doug back on and who knows. We can figure that the nuts and bolts of that out. So
Doug
as
just
far as
did he just did a new, that I just listened to that podcast he did with a new group that came out. I think it was SMT or something. Did you see that post? I don't know if you saw it. He just did a new one. And I've seen, the challenge, and even with me, and you do such a great job, is you could, is if you're not leading your guest, or if you don't prepare. I've seen Doug on podcasts, and it's not Doug's fault, but it's just I'm gonna fall asleep. And I love Doug. Doug's so fascinating, but they didn't prep, and they didn't have the right questions, and
right.
you do such a good job with that.
Thank you.
And
And I do
and
almost zero prep. I will for certain, like obviously Les Stroud, Todd Standing, those guys that can be a little squirmy and hard to pin down. I had to do a little research, but it's honestly almost 16 years in law enforcement. Interviewing people is just what I do, and it's what I love to do. And I usually can gauge people pretty quick. And I've had
Mhm.
people on the show. Unfortunately, Tom Shea was that guy. It took me 3 hours to edit his 45 minutes because I know he has so much to say, but it was like pulling it
you
from the bowels of the innards of Thomas Shea to get him to talk about it, and it took me forever to edit that together because I
Yeah,
was like, oh, I
Thomas
even said
is.
it. Yeah, I even said it at the beginning of the intro. I was like, he's a really shy guy. He doesn't talk about himself a lot, but he's done all these things in Bigfoot research. And yeah, it was like pulling teeth, man. And then you got people like Doug Hychek, and it's like, you know, he's a pro at it. And you were great
He is,
actually.
but you got to keep him focused
Right? He's like,
also.
oh, shiny object. There's
Yeah.
yeah.
And well, yeah, I've ran into that too because I have um, just some of the questions that you just gotta, I gotta be, it's not super prepared because I have a lot of my questions already already set up, but it's definitely because you got to keep it interesting too. So as I'm editing, like I'm pulling out a bunch of stuff because I want to make sure I got to put my head in the reader's mind and say, okay, I got to make this. Some of this might be interesting to me, but maybe people don't care. So the toughest thing is tweaking down and editing down the questions because there's so many. I mean, like I did, like Jeff Meldrum's probably, they, the goal is to try to keep chapters around 2,500 words is from the publishers, and Jeff's is just probably going to be 6,000. So it's what do you keep in, what do you take out, what do you,
Right.
and so that's always interesting. And then but then on the flip side, you have others that are pretty concise, and even some of the answers I got, what I did is I sent them preliminary questions ahead of time, not all the questions, but just maybe half of them, just some that I thought that they might want to put some more thought into, and some of it was to save me time.
Yeah.
Honestly, I sent them so they got but then there's some that don't, like I didn't do, didn't Jeff didn't do it, Cliff didn't do it, Les didn't do it. So then I got to go through the whole thing. Um, and yeah, some of the answers are one word or two words,
That's
but
that
it's
makes a tough day at the office, man, when you're doing this or you're trying to write a book. I know. I've been there. There's, and like I said, bless his heart, Tom Shea was that guy. I think that's probably the most challenging interview I've had thus far of people that have made their rounds and
Yeah,
been on
and you're
plenty of
used to asking,
podcasts.
and me too. I've been in sales my whole life, and so I'm always asking questions. It's what I do for a living. It's not interviews, but I did more. Poor Lauren Coleman was my first interview, and I mean, I was coming back from a funeral, and I should have rescheduled it, and I didn't, and and Lauren's been really really cool with it. But I think he was like him and Matt Pruitt were my guinea pigs, and um, but I've learned a lot because I guess I've been interviewing all my life, but I've never done this, never written a book or interviewed this type of interview, for a book. So, but this is cool. No,
Well, I
I
would love to
appreciate the
do.
opportunity. Yeah.
If you're willing, and there's absolutely no pressure. Obviously, this is not quid pro quo by any means, but people like Lauren Coleman, I've tried to find contact information for some of these researchers that I just can't find. So if you would be willing, anybody that is on your list that you can hook me up with via email or whatever that I could get on the show. I've actually not had Thomas Steenberg on the show. I'd love to have him on the show.
Oh, I thought you. Oh,
No,
okay.
but people like him, Lauren Coleman, some of the folks that are really difficult to get, I really
Yeah.
appreciate even if it's just an introduction. Hey, this guy's looking to get you on his podcast. Here's his email, or give me their email. Let me email them. Whatever. I'll have Danny do it. But
Dude, I'm telling you, it was, and Doug, I've already told Doug, I'm again, part of my career is what I do. I'm great at name dropping, you know. Doug's been such a blessing. I'm like, hey, because Doug's so respected. I mean, everyone, I don't think I don't think I've ever heard anyone say anything bad. Well, there was one that wasn't, that she was just, she's not in the book and she's not really in the world anymore, but yeah, it was interesting. It wasn't an interview. It was just a conversation I had, but
there's always one, right? There's always one in every crowd.
yeah, but anyway, Doug, yeah, just by doing, Doug's helped me with a bunch of them. With Les, he said, "Hey, tell Les, here's Les's email. We'll reach out to him and tell him that that I told, gave you his email." So Les's was really cool. Like I said, Les's is fresh because I finished Tom Steenberg's over the week, over the weekend, and just dove into Les's. I'm on my here's Les. So
Oh wow.
I usually go through what I'm learning is I got like this says V1 because it's the first version that I printed, and then I'm usually finished by version 4. I've got my chapter done, so it's it takes a little while, but yeah, I can totally hook you up with some people, that would be, that would be interesting to have. And yeah, it's tough because even with you is I don't want to I don't want to answer, I don't want to talk about the same things I talked about on Doug's podcast.
Right.
So I try to
Right.
keep it different, and I think I can just because there's so many different researchers. So I may focus in on every if the next couple ones I'll do just focusing on some different people, just so it's kind of keep it fresh. Still talk about all of them, but you know, um, but yeah, this is cool. And anything, anything you think, any input, you have that, feel free. I'm doing Wes, this guy from Squatchometrics, has ran me a ton of data, which I didn't even talk about on today, but I've got a bunch of data on. He's right now he's analyzed 8,000 reports, and then from there he's breaking it down by how many. I'm just looking at now how many reports had vocalization, how many had object throwing, how many were multi-person reports, road crossings. It's just a ton of really cool. So I have a couple pages in the book on that, and
Yeah,
then the
I've
guy.
had other people on the show that mentioned him in the past. I'd heard about him and I'd never really looked into his stuff, but I think it was Shane Corson that was
Mhm.
mentioned him when I had Shane on the show. And he does a lot of cool stuff, man. He's definitely good at what he does for sure.
Yeah, he's a what he does, his career, he's this he's a he's a statistician for the European Soccer League.
Hmm.
So all he does is looks at data, and then I think Doug was telling me, I think he was here and had a sighting or something and just kind of got him into it.
Hmm.
And then there's there's just some cool unique things. And then like I said, I'm going to dive right into the next book. I'm not sure where I'm going to start yet, but what I'll do is so if I do when I do the regional books, I'll be able to regurgitate some of the chapters, maybe do a couple tweaks, so that'll make the next books a little easier, because maybe a quarter of the people in the book were in the first book. So it's
Easier
just
is
going to be
always
tough,
good.
Brian. I'll tell you, there's going to be some people upset that they're not in the book. It's just me. I mean, I'm not no one special, but they're probably be, why wasn't I in the book? So it's just tough. Like, Todd's been one. Gosh, I've been back and forth on him. I'm probably going to interview him. He's not, I don't know. He's not going to get in the first book. He'll be mentioned, obviously, because there's a couple people mentioned him, but Todd Standing, what do you do with him? But if my book's about influencers, it's not, what I believe. It's just people who are out there influencing the subject.
Well,
So,
I know how you feel, but it's almost, in my opinion, would be almost impossible. You could certainly do it, but to put out a book on Bigfoot influencers and not include Todd Standing is almost impossible to do because
yeah.
he's love him or hate him. He said we've. Matter of fact, I was getting a message from him while we were in our interview. We were supposed to talk today because he wants to use some of my videos and stuff like that on his YouTube page. So we're trying to work out what that might look like. Like he literally wants to take interviews like yours and post them on his YouTube page. So I don't know. Well, we're trying to work that out, but I've continued to stay in contact with him and his wife, and they seem like really great people. And the verdict's still the jury's still out on his stuff, And I was on another show. I was on DA Roberts' show recently, yesterday, 2 days ago. I don't know. It all runs together. And we were talking about it on DA's show, and I mentioned the fact that I went back and listened to Todd's interview, and he said something very strange in the interview that I sort of honed in on, and he was talking about if I faked my videos, did I do it for species protection and all these things he started rattling off, and I was like, and it was sort of a question that somebody else asked him, but the way that he said it on the show was almost
Hmm.
like an admission, so to speak. So, and it's in the interview. I mean, everybody hears it. It's tons of people. It's one of the most downloaded shows I've done. He and Les Stroud, of course, but it's just interesting, man. He's influenced it one way or the other.
Yeah, yeah, and there's uh between us. I don't know if we're still recording, but
We are, but I'll
uh,
I don't want to stop it because it'll screw it up. But
no,
anything
that's fine.
that's off
Yeah,
the record, we
yeah.
stopped on the record when I said we ended the show.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I mean, and again, the one thing I'm objective. That's one of the cool things about this book. And actually, if you want to put this in there, it's there's a lot of controversy. And if you go back in history, there's a lot of controversy in what they'll call, quote unquote, the Bigfoot community. And it goes all the way back to the Four Horsemen, and it continues on from the 90s and later on. And there's just been a lot of people butting heads, and it should be for the common goal of, hey, let's discover this species, if it or whatever it is. But there's been so much controversy. But what I will say, one of the unique things about the book, I think because I don't say I'm on the outside, but I'm not doing research. I've had nothing but um, overwhelming support from, and I've met some really nice people. And there's a lot of researchers that a lot of people may not know about because they don't want you to know about them, but because they don't, or there's some researchers like Diane Stocking Niece, for example. Diane is, Todd Niece's wife. They met through this. Um, and she's been around a long time. I mean, she used to work with Bob, not work with Bobby Short, but she goes, Bobby Short's not around anymore, but she's been doing this for so long. She started in Florida. And if you're not into it, you may not know who she is. Of course, most of the folks that are into this, but if you don't, because she's been on TV, but everyone's been so overwhelmingly supportive and say, hey, do you need this? If you need anything else, or if I've done follow-ups, and it's been refreshing because I'm not getting the controversy. Again, yeah, I had a few researchers that said, "Hey, well, is this person going to be in the book, or is this person going to be in the book?" Because they wanted to qualify where my head was, if I was gonna if I'm a woo guy or a biological guy or whatever. So,
Right.
so they definitely were qualifying me. But so there was a couple of things like that and some reservations with some people because they want to make a mockery, or some people don't want to research. They're not out. They don't want people to really know about what they don't care if people know what they're doing. They just want to find the animal and protect the animal, if that's what it is. So, but there's just some interesting things, and but going back to that, I just think it's been overwhelmingly unique that I'm kind of out. I'm not in the, I'm not in the middle of any of that because I'm just writing a book about people, and I'm going to be objective. Like I said, I've been back and forth with Todd Standing. I'm going to interview him. Again, it may not I might wait till I do my Canadian book, and I'm going to mention a bunch of researchers in this book that I didn't interview, but I'll have a couple pages of other researchers out there. So, and like you said, like it or not, people may not like them, and researchers may not like him, but how can you leave them out of it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, and been totally back and forth on it for a long time. And I've gone back and I've even just sat and listened to some of he does his live YouTube shows sometimes, and Les gets into it with him. I mean, Les has got some really things, and he's candid about Todd, and obviously, you interviewed him too, so I've got some really unique things that Les said, that I'll have in the book, but. And then what I'm thinking about doing, and let me know what you think about this, because I don't know if you have the platform for it, but I told the publishing company, I told Alex Highcheck, I said, Alex, here's what I'm thinking is before we release the book to Amazon and all the national places, I would like to take individuals who have the ability to sell the book, like Lauren Coleman's got his museum and Cliff's got his museum, and let them, even if it's for a couple weeks, not release it. If you want the book, you got to get it from, you know, A, B, and C.
Hmm.
Just to give back. Let them get a shot at it first. And then we can release it on Amazon or something. That's kind of what I'm thinking. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a really good idea. I think it would drive the interest. They're like, oh, this is special because you can't get it in. This is the only couple of places you can get it. So I think that's definitely a good angle.
Well, and what happened, like, Russ's book, and I know Russ and I become pretty good friends. I knew Russ before, before the book, obviously. And Russ's book came out and I bought it on Amazon. And then Cliff posted something, said, I got a bunch of autographed books, Russ's books here, order here. I'm like, not that I can't get Russ's, I'll probably see Russ at some time here in the spring, but it's not about the autograph. But I'm thinking, wow, I could have bought it from Cliff, supported the museum instead of supporting Amazon, so that's kind of my thought. Maybe it's just for a couple weeks, but I thought maybe I'll whoever has the capability of selling a book, whether it's physically or they can ship them. I thought maybe I'll do that with some of the researchers.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And we're certainly trying to put together a new website and sort of put everything under the paranormal world productions, kind of all three shows in one place. So we'll definitely have more of an infrastructure over the next month or so. We should have the website done in about a month and have everything kind of moved over there because it's crazy trying to keep up with three different this and three different that with three shows. It just doesn't make sense, and I want everybody to be able to come into one place because everybody like something different, right? Somebody listens to true
Hmm.
crime that also likes Bigfoot and vice versa. And so it just makes sense. So we're just trying to logistically figure that out. But it's just grown so to the point where we have to do something because we just can't keep up with all three of the shows all the time in
Right.
separate places. So
How long does it take you to edit your interviews?
gosh, that is the majority of my time. It's spent editing, you know,
Oh, I know.
and it's an hour, and I'm a little bit anal about the editing because I've gotten the audio quality so advanced and so high on the show. I want to maintain that. So I will literally go through and pick out if I hear just the little in there, stuff that
Hmm.
people are just like, yeah, they don't even pay attention. It drives me insane. So an hour's worth of audio probably takes me an hour and a half to an hour and 45 minutes to edit
Yeah.
minimum. So
Yeah. Mine
I'm
was
doing
worse because,
sometimes
yeah.
two, like I've got another interview at 7 tonight with somebody else for another show. So it's I go through the interviews and they pile up, and then I've got like 14 shows. That's why you'll hear sometimes I'm talking about shit that happened like 6
Hmm.
months ago and I have people reach out to me. There's a guy, Isra, I can't remember his last name, in Florida. I interviewed him back in like October of last year, and I still haven't put a show out. And he's like, "Hey, is my show ever gonna come out?" And I'm like, "I'll get there. I'll get there." But I'll do this one a lot faster.
Oh, cool.
With
Yeah.
the book
Yeah.
coming out in a month or so, I'll probably make this like next week's show. So
Okay, cool. Yeah, yeah, and
people
and
will all
and
be
I
interested.
appreciate that. Yeah, this is fun, and I like I said, I enjoy what you do. It's you keep doing it because you definitely you have a knack for it, and it comes from a good objective perspective, but open minded, and who knows? I mean, I know you say you've had some things going on. I've never had any kind of thing that I could think was possible Sasquatch, but I'm not out in the woods a lot. I mean, I am some, but I'm not out. I don't live. I live near woods, but I live in Delaware, so we don't. We've had some sightings here, but I don't. We're not in the mountains, so.
Yeah, we've had some definitely interesting things going on the property here for sure.
And that's the biggest thing. I mean, I'm thinking back. There's a couple things we could have talked about, but there's thousands and thousands of reports. I mean, all you need is one to be legitimate. And there's something like Esteban is pretty cool. He actually wrote an essay. I've got to review his essay for him. I did about this phenomenon is, because something's going on. Either it could be if it's in everyone's minds, and then you've got people who aren't out there looking for it. Most of the people who see these things or encounter these things are not out there looking for it. They're just could be just in the right place at the right time or the wrong place at the wrong time. Depends on how you look at it. So,
Exactly.
so there's something. It's just, and that's what's fascinating me is it just something's to it. Can all these people be have misidentification or think they saw something that just and all these prints they can't all be hoaxed. It's just
I see it
I
all the
think.
time, man. The phenomenon is real. I don't know what it is, but the
Yeah, there's
phenomenon
something
is
to
real.
it. Yeah, whether it's but Esteban has a pretty good an essay that he touches on that, and he's on what is it?
It
There's
sounds like
something going on
somebody I'd
here.
want to have on the show for sure.
Yeah, yeah, he would be fun. He would definitely be fun to get on the show. And what I like, even with Doug's, what actually when I do Matt's, he's gonna have Matt Pruitt on the show. I'm gonna give because Matt's a rock star. I mean, because you've had Matt. Matt's just he's so awesome. He's so smart. I mean, I feel like I'm an idiot when I listen to him, but uh I'm gonna, I like having keep it loose, but I like having an agenda. I don't know if I stayed to mine. I think my sheets were too far away. I had some things, a bunch of things up here written, but keeping it on point and knowing, I listen to enough podcasts now. I say, okay, Brian is good at, if you talk about this and this, he'll rock it out. Or he just talked about that last week. And here's something else that he knows, so I might even I told Doug, I said, I'll send you an agenda for Matt if you want. I can tell you some things to ask him that will be, that will really be interesting. So
I've
I
got
think it's all about preparing, keeping it
Yeah,
loose but
and
preparing.
Matt's one of those people. Even if you're not, he'll be great. I he's a great resource to have. He's helped me so much after I had him on the show. I can shoot him a text message and he'll answer and say, "Hey, did you think about this?" Or I was thinking about doing a television show, and I called him up and we talked about it. And he was like, just make sure you do this, because he's got that experience from finding Bigfoot,
Hmm.
and has the inside scoop. So, and I've actually got to go on Doug's show. I think it's on my schedule for the 8th of March is when I'll be on. So,
Yeah, either you sent me that or Doug did. I saw that was coming. Matt's going to be on this show in March too as well. Um, so yeah, I wasn't expecting. He gave me a couple weeks. He goes, "Hey, are you available this date to be on the show?" I'm like, "Really? I'm not even done with the book yet." So we had fun though.
it's always
I've been listening. I still haven't listened to the podcast I did with Doug yet.
that was great, man. I thought it was great.
Oh, good.
There's times when I listen to their show and I just cringe, and I've even thought, oh, I'll probably piss Doug off, but I've even thought about calling him up and saying, dude, let me edit your show. Please let me edit your show, because it drives me insane. Some of the peaks and valleys and the
Mhm.
audio and the things that they have, and I don't know how they do it. I think it's a live show, obviously, and I don't know if they just don't edit it and they just put it out or whatever.
They do, yeah. That's it's you get what you get. So
And it's
there's good and bad to that. The good is they don't have to
true.
edit it. They're
The
done.
good is that, but I guess for podcasters like me, I guess most people are just like, they don't care, they don't give a shit. But I've often thought I'll just reach out to Doug and say, especially if it's like a special person, like a
Mhm.
really well known person or whatever, I'll take the 2 hours and edit the damn show before
Mhm.
you put it out
Yeah,
on
yeah,
Facebook.
definitely. And yeah, and sometimes sometimes you're like your ears right there listening the whole time, and other times you're like, because
Yeah,
the
because literally
guest.
there's a simple free. It's called the Levelator, and I don't even know if I've mentioned it. I've evidently have never mentioned it to Doug before, but before they put it on, they've got to have an audio file. You can run a WAV file through the Levelator, and then export it through Audacity as an MP3 before they upload it. And everything that happens, no matter if it gets really loud or it's really like this, it brings everything up to the exact same level, and it changed my life. I learned that from
Wow.
from Wes Germer on Sasquatch Chronicles. Wes called me up and said, "Get the Levelator, dude."
Oh, cool.
And
Yeah,
I
and that's what I learned
truly,
with this is doing the transcribing was kicking my butt. I mean, I would, because you said 2 hours, I would do an interview, and again, I'm squeezing it in because I work full time, so I'm doing it in the morning, I'm doing it in the evenings, I'm doing it on weekends, and just trying. So then I was listening to my my interview, typing out everything they said, re-listening. I go back and forth, and I finally, like I said, this past weekend, I got this. It's Onyx or something, I think it's called, and it's just this transcribing service, automated, and it changed my life. And I wish I did it before I did all these other chapters. I mean, I would have probably had the book out by now. I really would have. It's what a difference it makes, because I still got to edit it, but like last was the first one I tried out, and it just everything's right there, and I can actually edit it. It's in it. It's not software. It's on the cloud, so I didn't have to download anything on my work computer, um, and it's just out there. And it's like $5 per hour of audio. So, if I do an hour interview, it's $5. And then there's a $22 fee a month.
that's not
So
bad.
it's not that much. I mean, it's, hopefully I at least cover that when I sell some books. So,
I'm sure you will, man. All right,
but
well, I'm
it's
going to get
fun.
off,
Yeah, man.
get ready to get this other interview going here at
If there's
7
anything
o'clock.
else you need, reach out to me. I
Will
appreciate
do.
it.
Same thing, man. You have a good one.
Will do. Thanks.